They lit up the silver screen with beauty, charm, and what seemed like perfection. But behind the glamour of old Hollywood was a truth the studios fought hard to keep buried. Many of the most iconic stars, faces we still admire today, lived with deformities and disabilities that would have stunned the public. Some were born with these conditions. Others developed them after tragic accidents or life-altering illnesses. But one thing united them all: a brutal price they paid to maintain the illusion of flawlessness. These stars weren't just silenced, they were controlled. Some were pushed through dangerous, experimental treatments with little understanding or consent. Others were forced to keep performing while in unbearable pain. And if they ever dared to speak up, they were dismissed as difficult, their suffering labeled mere artistic moodiness. So before we peel back the curtain any further, here are 5 shocking truths that expose the dark, hidden reality beneath Hollywood's golden age of glamour. What you're about to learn may change the way you see these stars forever. Rita Hayworth, the price of perfection. Rita Hayworth didn't just rise to stardom, she was manufactured by Hollywood, piece by painful piece. Born Margarita Cancino, she was dismissed by Columbia Pictures as too ethnic, her Spanish features labeled unmarketable by studio head Harry Cohn. What followed was not just a makeover, it was a total erasure of identity. Over the course of a year, Rita endured one of the most brutal beauty transformations in Hollywood history. Without anesthesia, she sat in silence, biting down on a towel while electric needles burned into her scalp. Inch by inch, the electrolysis raised her hairline, removing every trace of her natural heritage. Blood often soaked through her blouses during the procedures. She never spoke of the pain publicly, but once, when a makeup artist saw her flinch, she whispered, "I wait for the scabs to heal before I can sleep on that side." But the agony didn't stop at the scalp. Rita suffered from a physical imbalance. One leg was shorter than the other. Behind every flawless dance number was a hidden struggle. Her high heels were specially modified, one nearly an inch taller than the other, forcing her hips into constant pain. She danced through it all with grace, masking the torment beneath sequins and smiles. Emotionally, the cost was even steeper. Hollywood didn't just change her appearance, it trained her to forget who she was. Studio handlers coached her to feign ignorance if anyone brought up her Spanish roots. "They made me ashamed of who I was," she would later confess to her daughter. "They told me no one would want a Spanish girl." And the cruelest twist? After sacrificing her identity to become America's dream girl, she realized she could never escape the fantasy. "Men go to bed with Gilda," she once said of her famous screen persona, "but they wake up with me." Behind the glamour was a woman torn apart by an image she never asked to become. Lon Chaney, the man who became his monsters. Lon Chaney wasn't just Hollywood's man of 1,000 faces. He was the man who suffered 1,000 agonies to bring those faces to life. Behind the groundbreaking transformations was a painful truth. Chaney tortured his own body for the art of illusion, and it ultimately destroyed him. Born to deaf parents, Chaney learned to communicate through sign language from infancy, developing an extraordinary mastery of facial control. But his talent didn't stop at expression. He pushed his body to horrific extremes, reshaping himself with devices so brutal, even seasoned film crews looked away. For the Hunchback of Notre Dame, he didn't simply wear a fake hump. He strapped on a 70-pound contraption made of concrete and metal that crushed his ribs and compressed his organs. The pain was so unbearable, he could only wear it for 10 minutes at a time. Between takes, assistants had to pry it off so he could gasp for air. His spine never healed. "I found him vomiting blood between scenes," director Wallace Worsley once said. When Worsley suggested a lighter rig, Chaney refused. "Quasimodo suffered," he said. "So must I." For The Phantom of the Opera, Chaney wired his nostrils open, inserted painful hooks in his cheeks to pull his face into a skeletal grin, and painted his eye sockets with chemicals so harsh, they left him temporarily blind after long days on set. But it was London after midnight that pushed him too far. To create the vampire's terrifying smile, Chaney embedded sharpened wires around his gums, wounds that became infected and led to blood poisoning. He was hospitalized for 2 weeks, though the studio publicly blamed exhaustion. The toll was irreversible. Years of self-inflicted suffering ravaged his immune system, leaving him vulnerable to the pneumonia that ended his life at just 47. On his deathbed, Lon Chaney is said to have whispered the chilling truth. "I created monsters, now they've created me." Clark Gable, the king's painful secret Hollywood tried to bury. He was the king of Hollywood, rugged, charming, irresistible. But behind that dazzling smile and undeniable charisma, Clark Gable lived a secret torment that could have shattered his leading man image forever. That iconic Gable grin? It wasn't real. By the age of 32, advanced gum disease had destroyed his teeth. Every last one had to be pulled. What followed were ill-fitting dentures that caused constant infections, blistering ulcers, and a level of daily pain few could endure. Vivian Leigh, his co-star in Gone with the Wind, once wrote in her diary, "Kissing Clark felt like pressing your lips to a burning stove." The heat from his infected gums radiated through his mouth, while his dentures created a faint whistle that sound engineers struggled to mask. And the smell, an unshakable chronic halitosis, turned every love scene into a quiet nightmare for his leading ladies. Joan Crawford reportedly dabbed peppermint oil inside her nostrils before every romantic scene with Gable. It was a secret tip she passed along to other actresses forced to get close. Director Victor Fleming even pioneered a trick during filming, close-up switching. Instead of putting Gable through prolonged discomfort, romantic close-ups were often shot using a stand-in dressed in identical clothes, filmed from behind. The technique, now standard in Hollywood, was invented just to shield Gable from the agony of those scenes. Privately, Gable was crushed. Despite his public swagger, the pain and shame eroded his confidence. He avoided restaurants and always covered his mouth when he laughed, not out of modesty, but to hide the fear that his dentures might slip. At night, the king of Hollywood soaked his false teeth in a glass beside the bed, terrified anyone might catch a glimpse. His fifth wife, Kay Williams, later said it best, "The man who made women melt with a smile spent his nights praying no one saw what was behind it." And Gable wasn't alone. The golden age of Hollywood was built on illusion. Leading ladies had scars, disabilities, and deformities carefully hidden by the studio machine. One major actress had a full prosthetic leg crafted at the cost of an average home. Others used body doubles for scenes showing physical features they wanted hidden. A beloved Western star rode with a custom saddle to hide a spinal deformity, now on display in a museum with no mention of its real purpose. Hollywood didn't just airbrush photographs. It airbrushed pain, disability, and the very humanity of its stars. James Dean, the rebel icon with a heartbreaking secret. To the world, he was the embodiment of effortless cool. Aloof, magnetic, untouchable. But behind that famous squint and brooding stare was a young man quietly battling a world he could barely see or hear. Dean was severely nearsighted from childhood. Without his thick glasses, banned on camera, he couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. That iconic squint? It wasn't attitude. It was survival. On the set of Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray noticed Dean struggling to find his marks on the floor. The crew had to physically guide him into place before each take. He was, in many ways, acting blind. But that wasn't all. Dean also suffered from partial hearing loss. On chaotic film sets, he often couldn't hear cues or directions clearly. So he developed what became his trademark, a delayed, thoughtful reaction time. What looked like brilliant method acting was actually him trying to catch up, processing sound just a beat slower than everyone else. Studios mistook it for dramatic flair or stubbornness, never realizing it was his only way of coping. This misreading led to whispers that Dean was difficult. In truth, he was overwhelmed, fighting to stay connected in a world that often felt muffled and blurry. Between takes, he withdrew into himself, deepening his image as a loner. But the truth was far more tragic. He once confided in his friend Dennis Hopper, "People think I'm being difficult, but I'm just trying to understand what's going on. I'm always behind, always trying to catch up." His line in Rebel Without a Cause, "I'm involved now," hit deeper than anyone knew. It wasn't just a character's cry, it was James Dean's own desperate plea to belong. To be seen. to be heard. But Hollywood, while profiting off his tortured image, refused to acknowledge the very conditions that made him that way. They exploited the pain they never cared to understand. And by the time the world finally saw James Dean for who he really was, it was too late. He was gone at 24, forever frozen in time, still chasing clarity in a world that never gave it to him. Mel Oberon. 2 lives, 2 tragedies. Behind Hollywood's shimmering spotlight stood a woman caught in one of the industry's most heartbreaking illusions. Touted as an exotic beauty, Oberon carried 2 secrets the world was never supposed to know: the physical scars from a devastating accident, and the racial truth Hollywood forced her to bury. In 1937, a brutal car crash nearly ended her career. The public was told it was minor. It wasn't. The impact shattered her cheekbone and severed nerves, paralyzing half her face. Off-screen, Oberon lived in constant fear that the camera would expose her drooping muscles, her unmovable expression. Her husband, cinematographer Lucien Ballard, didn't just support her, he changed cinema for her. He developed the OB light, a camera-mounted invention that bathed her face in shadowless light, hiding the disfigurement. Hollywood praised it as genius lighting, never as a lifeline for a woman struggling to smile. Her makeup artist later revealed the heartbreaking routine. Between takes, someone had to quietly wipe away drool from the left side of her face before the crew noticed. Oberon lived in silent panic, terrified that one slip would ruin everything. But the scars she hid went deeper than skin. Mel Oberon was born in India, the daughter of an Anglo-Indian mother. In a racist era where leading ladies were only white, Oberon was forced to erase her identity. Every morning began with layers of whitening makeup that left her skin raw and burning. The chemicals lightened her complexion, but poisoned her soul. During the filming of Wuthering Heights, the emotional strain broke her. Director William Wyler insisted on brighter lighting that threatened to expose both her facial scars and the brown skin beneath the powder. She collapsed on set. The studio blamed exhaustion. In truth, it was a breakdown years in the making. Her most painful moment came years later in Bombay. There, her Indian relatives greeted her with love and pride. She turned away, denied them, pretended not to know them, choosing her fake Tasmanian backstory over her real bloodline. As tears ran down her face, she walked away from her family and a piece of herself. She carried the weight until her final days. "I don't know who I am anymore," she once told her last husband. "The face in my mirror isn't mine. And neither is the history they've given me." Jean Tierney, the beautiful face that hid a world of pain. She was hailed as one of the most breathtaking women to ever grace the silver screen, Hollywood's ideal of perfection. But behind that flawless face was a woman fighting battles no one could see. Jean Tierney lived in a world distorted by severe colorblindness, unable to tell red from green. What seemed like a minor flaw to others became a constant source of fear and shame. On set, every costume fitting felt like a trap. Designers spoke in colors she couldn't perceive, leaving her to rely on texture and memory just to get by. "I lived in terror," she once confessed, "of someone asking how I liked the red dress, when I couldn't tell if it was red or green." Her condition turned simple scenes into emotional landmines. While filming Leave Her to Heaven, she was supposed to identify a red boat in a crowded harbor. Unable to spot it, she memorized its position instead, only to find the crew had rearranged everything. The mistake led to a public scolding from the director, until a crew member finally realized the truth and quietly helped her. But her invisible struggles didn't end there. Tierney also battled bipolar disorder and crippling depression, mental health issues that the studio system didn't just ignore, but exploited. When her mood swings disrupted filming, doctors injected her with so-called vitamin shots, a reckless mix of amphetamines and barbiturates meant to keep her going at all costs. The result? A complete breakdown that led to her institutionalization and electroshock therapy. The treatments robbed her of her memory. When she eventually returned to the screen, she could no longer memorize lines and had to rely on cue cards, even for the shortest scenes. The studio doctors knew exactly what they were doing, she later told her daughter. They were burning the candle at both ends, calculating how many films they could get out of me before I broke. Tierney's beauty, once her greatest asset, became her cruelest burden. While her mind crumbled under pressure, her face remained untouched, tricking the world into believing everything inside was just as perfect. But the truth was far more tragic. Behind that iconic image was a woman forced to perform through pain, silently battling disabilities that Hollywood refused to see. Lloyd, the daredevil with a secret disability. The man famously seen dangling from skyscraper clocks in Safety Last was hiding a shocking truth. Lloyd had only one fully functional hand. In 1919, a prop bomb exploded in his right hand, blowing off his thumb and index finger and destroying nerves in the rest. The injury was far worse than fans ever knew. To keep working, Lloyd wore a custom prosthetic glove that looked normal on screen but robbed him of grip strength. During his most iconic stunts, he was holding on for dear life with just 3 usable fingers. One slip could have killed him. What drove him? Pure defiance. Studios wanted him behind the camera after the accident, but Lloyd refused. Every death-defying stunt was his way of proving he wasn't broken. He even banned safety gear if it showed on camera. Behind the scenes, the glove caused painful infections, but revealing his disability would have ended his career. In Hollywood's golden age, any physical flaw could mean contract termination. Lloyd, like many stars of his time, lived in fear of being exposed, not for scandal, but for being seen as imperfect. Bela Lugosi, the real pain behind Dracula's eyes. When Bela Lugosi brought Count Dracula to life, audiences saw a chilling icon. What they didn't see was the pain. The stiff, slow, almost ghostly walk that became his signature wasn't acting. It was survival. Lugosi moved like that because he had no choice. Ravaged by sciatica from old World War I injuries, every step sent bolts of agony through his body. Crew members on the Dracula set recalled him gripping furniture between takes, his knuckles turning white as he fought to stay upright. As soon as the director yelled, "Cut," assistants rushed in with his cane, his morphine, anything to keep him going. And still, the moment the cameras rolled, he became Dracula again. Flawless, commanding, terrifying. That famous accent? "I never drink, Lon." It wasn't just theatrical flair. Lugosi had suffered a brain injury during the war that made language processing difficult. He memorized scripts phonetically, turning every line into a carefully crafted performance. The result? A hypnotic, halting cadence that became Dracula's voice for generations. But the real tragedy? He was nearly blind. Without his thick glasses, unusable on camera, Lugosi could barely see the people he acted with. His piercing stare, the one that chilled millions, came from straining to make out blurry figures in the shadows. It wasn't eerie acting, it was desperation. He stumbled into props, fell over set pieces, and bled for his roles. But Universal Studios saw none of it as suffering. They called it genius. They marketed his pain as performance, refusing to alter production schedules even as Lugosi collapsed off camera. It wasn't until director Todd Browning found him unconscious between takes that any changes were made. And that morphine, first given for real pain, would later haunt him with addiction. A cruel twist for a man already living a horror behind the scenes. Still, Lugosi never complained. To a young fan who once asked about his unusual walk, he replied gently, "The monsters I play suffer physically. I understand their pain." Katharine Hepburn, the trembling queen who outsmarted Hollywood. She was Hollywood royalty, fierce, independent, unforgettable. But behind Katharine Hepburn's aristocratic poise and sharp wit was a secret she fought to hide her entire career, a neurological disorder that could have ended it all. In her early 30s, Hepburn developed essential tremor, a progressive condition that caused her hands and head to shake uncontrollably. But rather than offer support, MGM executives dismissed her tremors as nerves, calling her unprofessional when her hands quivered on set. So she adapted, and in doing so, rewrote the rules of stardom. Hepburn crafted a unique, clipped speaking style with sharp, rhythmic emphasis, not for flair, but to mask the trembling. She made pockets fashionable in women's costumes to hide her unsteady hands, and wrapped her neck in high collars and scarves to steady her head. "Watch her films with the sound off," her longtime cinematographer once said. She's always in motion. That wasn't artistic choice, it was survival. Constant movement helped blur the tremors into choreography. Director George Cukor became her fiercest ally. He redesigned scenes to incorporate more motion, used clever camera angles to minimize the shaking, and fought studios for longer takes, letting Hepburn find her rhythm instead of freezing under the stress of stop-and-go filming. But the emotional toll was brutal. Hepburn avoided social gatherings, fearful her condition would betray her in public. Her reputation for being difficult often came from requesting filming setups she couldn't explain, because to reveal her condition would have been career suicide. "I'm not eccentric," she once told Spencer Tracy. "I'm strategic. Every move I make is about controlling what people see." Tragically, the same studios that profited from her brilliance used her secret against her, threatening to expose her condition whenever she pushed back on roles or working conditions. The pressure eventually drove her into a 5-year exile, branded box office poison. Ironically, her tremors worsened during that break, no longer masked by the constant vigilance of hiding them. And yet, Katharine Hepburn triumphed. The voice, the scarves, the electric energy, all the quirks that made her a legend were not just style, but survival. What Hollywood saw as elegance was, in truth, a masterclass in adaptation. And what they feared would make her unemployable became part of what made her unforgettable. Lionel Barrymore, Hollywood's reluctant pioneer of disability. Long before Hollywood was ready to embrace visible disabilities, Lionel Barrymore shattered the illusion, whether the studios liked it or not. Known for his unforgettable character roles, Barrymore became the first major star to continue his career openly using a wheelchair. But the road to that reluctant breakthrough was paved with suffering, silence, and brutal studio control. In the early 1930s, Barrymore began battling crippling arthritis. But MGM refused to acknowledge it publicly. Instead, they demanded he maintain a facade of health, even as his body failed him. What the public didn't know was that Barrymore had also shattered his hip, which never healed properly due to a severe bone infection. The studio's solution? Iron braces hidden beneath his clothing that forced his damaged joints to bear weight. The devices tore into his flesh. He often collapsed the moment he made it off set. His underclothes would be soaked in blood, one stand-in recalled. Still, he pushed through each scene without complaint. When even the braces could no longer keep him standing, MGM was forced to confront reality. Faced with losing one of their most bankable stars, they finally allowed Barrymore to appear in a wheelchair, but only on their terms. The truth of his condition was concealed from the public. Studio press agents blamed a single injury, framing his disability as temporary, even noble. The message was clear: real, progressive disability still had no place in Hollywood's glossy narrative. Even then, the exploitation didn't stop. His salary was slashed, despite his films still drawing crowds. When Barrymore protested, executives threatened to suspend him, fully aware his rising medical bills left him financially trapped. And while his presence in a wheelchair on screen broke ground, it also came with limitations. He was often cast in roles that treated his disability as a symbol of cruelty or weakness. His most famous role, Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, cemented this trend, associating his visible condition with villainy. Still, Barrymore's resilience changed the game. He became a symbol of perseverance in an industry that worshipped physical perfection. Even if the representation was flawed, his very presence cracked open a door that had always been bolted shut. Beyond the spotlight, courage in the shadows of fame. These stories from Hollywood's golden age aren't just about stars, they're about survival. Behind every iconic performance was a human being grappling with pain, disability, and mental strain, often in silence. The glamour hid the grit, and yet they endured. So next time you revisit a classic film, remember, those dazzling smiles often masked invisible battles. Their brilliance wasn't just in their acting, but in their ability to keep shining through adversity. They didn't succeed despite their struggles. They succeeded because they refused to let those struggles define them. Which story moved you most? Tell us in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join us next time as we reveal more untold secrets from Hollywood's past.